Hello and welcome to Pro-Life Primetime News. Today is Friday, October 27th. I'm Leslie Palma.
And I'm Teresa Watson. We're so happy to have you with us tonight. In our top story, we'll give you the latest good news from Texas, where Lubbock County has passed an ordinance to outlaw the act of transporting another person along its roads for an abortion. Markley Dixon, founder of the Sanctuary City movement, will be our guest.
Britney Spears' bombshell revelation that she had an abortion 20 years ago with then-boyfriend Justin Timberlake continues to make headlines. Rachel's Vineyard founder, Dr. Teresa Burke, will talk about the element of coercion in Britney's abortion story.
In Abortion in the News, Leslie will report on pro-life victories in Georgia and Colorado and talk about an effort in Michigan to return women to the infamous back alley for abortion.
In political news in a nutshell, Teresa will tell you about our new Speaker of the House of Representatives and how Arkansas Governor Sarah Sanders is battling woke nonsense in her state.
We'll close with a story about an Ohio restaurant owner who took a stand for life. We hope you'll stay with us.
Lubbock is a city of 261,000 in northwest Texas. The city made history in 2021 by declaring itself a sanctuary city for the unborn, where abortion was not welcome. It was the 26th city to declare itself a safe haven for the unborn, but it was the first that had an abortion business, Planned Parenthood, located within its borders. The nation's #1 abortion seller sued, but eventually dropped the lawsuit. Lubbock is back in the news this week after Lubbock County, which includes the city, passed an ordinance to outlaw the act of transporting another person along its roads for an abortion. The aim is to prevent women from using Lubbock County as a pass-through point on their way to an abortion in New Mexico. Several staffers from the Southwest Coalition for Life in New Mexico made the 7-hour drive to tell county commissioners that every day they see cars with Texas license plates in abortion business parking lots. In New Mexico, the average number of monthly abortions in the year after Roe v. Wade was overturned increased 61%.
Amarillo, a city in the Texas Panhandle that's 50 miles from the New Mexico border, was looking at adopting a similar ordinance. The agenda item on Tuesday was for discussion only and did not conclude until late into the night. Our viewers know Markley Dixon by now. He's the director of Right for Life of East Texas and the creator of Sanctuary City movement. We've asked him to come back to tell us about the latest developments. Welcome back to the show, Mark.
Great to join you guys today.
So congratulations on Lubbock County. How many cities and counties are sanctuaries for the unborn now?
We're currently at a total of 67 cities and 6 counties across 7 different states.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Wow. Well, Mark, can you explain how the Lubbock ordinance would work?
Absolutely. The Lubbock ordinance is enforced the same way the Texas Heartbeat Act and has the same provision as all of the ordinances that have been passed in Texas, that private enforcement mechanism, allowing private citizens to file a lawsuit against anyone in violation of the ordinance.
All right, then. So what prompted the Amarillo City Councilors to schedule the ordinance as a discussion-only item? And do you have hope the council might vote on it at some point?
You know, we've been working in Amarillo for so long. This has been a effort that has been underway for several years. I've had lots of meetings with people in Amarillo about this measure, and we've had a change in leadership. And so we're having new conversations with leadership. And I'm excited about the Amarillo initiative. I'm hopeful that we are going to see a consideration of an ordinance here before too long. They're in this great city of Amarillo.
All right. Well, are you working on any new cities or counties? What are you up to?
Well, Chicago and San Francisco, I'm joking. We would love to see cities like Chicago and San Francisco, and one day we will see those cities become sanctuaries for the unborn as well. But for right now, we are working on the counties along the Texas-New Mexico border and the Texas-Oklahoma border. We're really wanting to get those counties to be sanctuary counties for the unborn. And, you know, it's a process. We really need people in those areas that are interested in leading the charge to help us out in that. And so they can sign the online petition at sanctuarycitiesfortheunborn.com. And we have people in several of these counties that have reached out and are doing everything that they can, boots on the ground. And sometimes this takes a while, but we are optimistic that we will see these places become sanctuaries for the unborn and cut off abortion trafficking to the state of New Mexico and Colorado and Kansas and other states where abortions are taking place.
Well, Mark, as always, we thank you for your overwhelming commitment to protecting unborn life in our nation. And thanks for joining us. And we look forward to having you come back when you have more good news to share.
Sounds great. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. There was more good news from Texas this week. A federal judge in Amarillo has ruled that a lawsuit filed by the state against Planned Parenthood must go to trial. The $1.8 billion lawsuit accuses the abortion business of defrauding the state Medicaid program by overbilling about $17 million. But the legal penalties for fraud are potentially many times that. A trial will begin in April 2024. The story of Britney Spears' abortion with singer Justin Timberlake in the early 2000s, which we reported last week, continues to make headlines. In her book published this week, The Woman in Me, she relates that when she became pregnant, Timberlake was adamant that a baby would be bad for their careers. Britney wrote, "Justin definitely wasn't happy about the pregnancy. I kind of understood. If he didn't want to become a father, I didn't feel like I had much of a choice. I wouldn't want to push him into something he didn't want. Our relationship was too important to me. And so I'm sure people will hate me for this, but I agreed not to have the baby. If it had been left to me alone, I never would have done it." Many women are pressured into abortion by the baby's father or their own parents or employers. It's a huge problem that receives very little coverage in the mainstream media. But Dr. Teresa Burke, founder of Rachel's Vineyard, a ministry of priests for life, and the world's largest program for healing after abortion, has much to say on the subject. We have a video she recorded last week after the Britney bombshell broke.
Everyone's talking about Britney Spears and her forthcoming book, The Woman in Me. In her memoir, she reveals that she suffered the loss of a child in an abortion with Justin Timberlake. He was her teenage sweetheart, and they dated from 1999 until 2002. They were 17 and 18 years old. She reveals that the pregnancy was a surprise, but for me, she states, it wasn't a tragedy. I love Justin so much, and I always expected us to have a family together one day. She goes on to say that this would be just much earlier than I had anticipated. But Justin definitely wasn't happy about the pregnancy. He said we weren't ready to have a baby in our lives and that we were way too young. Britney shared the agony of her decision. If it had been left up to me alone, I never would have done it. And yet Justin was so sure that he did not want to be a father. The assumption that an abortion is truly a woman's choice was recently disputed by the findings of a 2023 study conducted by the Charlotte Lozier Institute. In a national sample of women between 41 and 45 years of age, only 33% described their abortions as wanted and consistent with her values and preferences. All others, a whopping 67%, described it as contrary to their values and their preferences, with 24% describing their abortions as coerced. In fact, the American Psychological Association lists pressure from others to terminate a pregnancy as a risk factor for mental health problems after abortion. It's well known. Britney checks that box because she was terminating a pregnancy that was wanted and meaningful. Britney was in love with Justin, and she dreamed they'd have a family together. Other well-known risk factors for post-abortion trauma was her belief that abortion was morally wrong, as well as her ambivalence about the abortion decision. Britney shares in her book that she was raised not to get an abortion. Part of it was religious, and part of it is just what she learned from her family. In a previous study, researchers found that over 60% of women reported high to moderate levels of pressure to agree to an abortion, with only 5% of women saying that they felt little or no pressure to choose their abortions. Only 5% felt there was no pressure. The new study also found that 2/3 reported more negative effects, and they were more likely to say that their abortions contributed to a decline in their mental health. Britney, we know, was haunted for years, and the abortion damaged her psychologically, propelling her to abuse drugs, rush into the marriage with Kevin Federline as she desperately yearned to become a mother again. She shares, and I quote, "To this day, it was one of the most agonizing things I have ever experienced in my life." And we know she suffered a lot of trauma. This was the worst. And sure enough, when someone is unable to heal from traumatic experiences, they unconsciously get into situations which repeat fragments and can repeat themes of the original trauma. We call this traumatic reenactment, repetition compulsion. It's part of trauma bonding and certainly part of PTSD. All of these factors can lead to addiction in order to constrict powerful emotions. In a future video, I hope to share how Britney, a very talented, creative, and beautiful young woman's life, spiraled totally out of control as we look at the classic symptoms I've heard repeated all over the world related to pregnancy loss and unresolved grief. So I hope you can join me when we can explore the traumatic reenactment of multiple themes where others were able to gain complete control over Britney's life as she re-experienced profound powerlessness, the loss of her motherhood, sterility from a forced IUD, and years of heartbreak and grief as everyone else was able to move on with their lives, creating families of their own. And in the meantime, I can't wait to read her book. And you can read scores of true stories in my book, Forbidden Grief, The Unspoken Pain of Abortion, which is the study of the mystery, the drama, and the repetition of trauma after abortion, and why it's so important to help women like Britney who are suffering the loss of a child after abortion to heal. God bless you.
I bought Britney's book this week because I wanted to know if she said anything else about abortion, and what she wrote paints a terrible and true picture of what a chemical abortion is really like. As we share these words, please keep in mind that more than half of all abortions in the U.S. now are chemical abortions, where a woman turns her own home into an abortuary. The mainstream media, without fail, reports that chemical abortion is a safe and simple alternative to a surgical abortion. Take a few pills, bleed a little, problem solved. But here's Britney's version. We also did something that in retrospect wound up being, in my view, wrong, and that was that I should not go to a doctor or a hospital to have the abortion. It was important that no one find out about the pregnancy or the abortion, which meant doing everything at home. I was told it might hurt a little bit. I took the little pills. Soon I started having excruciating cramps. I went into the bathroom and stayed there for hours, lying on the floor, sobbing and screaming. I was so scared. I lay there wondering if I was going to die.
Britney continues, "When I tell you it was painful, I can't begin to describe it. The pain was unbelievable. To this day, it's one of the most agonizing things I have ever experienced in my life. Still, they didn't take me to the hospital. It took hours, and I don't remember how it ended, but I do, 20 years later, remember the pain of it and the fear." At the website abortiontestimony.com, we have thousands of stories women have recorded about their abortions. Those who have written about chemical abortion all tell a version of Britney's stories, remembering the pain and the fear, and for many of them, a loss of blood no one prepared them for.
Britney had her abortion very soon after chemical abortion was approved by the FDA, and her description makes it seem like she only took the second drug, misoprostol. Abortion sellers like Planned Parenthood have already said that if the first drug, mifepristone, is taken off the market, women should still perform at-home abortion with misoprostol. They don't mention the pain or the fear or the memories that linger for a lifetime. Georgia's Supreme Court this week allowed the state's heartbeat bill to remain in effect, but sent the case back to a lower court to determine whether the state constitution protects a right to privacy and whether that right encompasses abortion. The Living Infants Fairness and Equality Act was signed by Governor Brian Kemp in 2019. The case, decided this week by a 6-1 decision of the Supreme Court, centered on whether the law was invalid when it was enacted because Roe v. Wade still allowed for abortion pre-viability. In her majority opinion, Justice Vedra Colvin wrote, "The United States Supreme Court clearly ruled in Dobbs that Roe and its progeny no longer control abortion at the federal level. Courts instead must faithfully apply Dobbs, which gave the power to regulate abortion back to the states." In more good news for pro-life, a federal judge has ruled that Colorado cannot prohibit a Catholic health clinic from using abortion pill reversal to save babies if a mother has a change of heart after ingesting the first drug in a chemical abortion. Earlier this year, the Colorado legislature passed a bill that said offering abortion reversal medication was unprofessional conduct under the state's medical licensing laws. But late Saturday, U.S. District Court Judge Daniel Domenico granted Bella Health and Wellness a preliminary injunction that blocks Colorado from enforcing the prohibition. Domenico wrote, "The law at issue here runs afoul of First Amendment principles. Because it does, the state must come forward with a compelling interest of the highest order to maintain the law. It has not even attempted to do so." Tennessee's Attorney General is suing the federal government for withholding millions of dollars in family planning funds because the state refuses to comply with federal rules requiring clinics to provide abortion referrals. Tennessee receives about $7 million annually to help nearly 100 clinics provide birth control and basic health care services, mainly to low-income women. "We are suing to stop the federal government from playing politics with the health of Tennessee women," said Attorney General Jonathan Skrmetti. "Our lawsuit is necessary to ensure that Tennessee can continue its 50-year track record of successfully providing these public health services to its neediest populations." A law enacted after the fall of Roe protects most babies from abortion in the state. A bill passed by the Michigan Senate that would remove licensing, reporting, and inspection requirements for abortion facilities is being described as back alley abortion legislation by a Republican senator who opposes it. Whatever happened to the calls to make abortions safe, legal, and rare? Senator Dan Lowers asked in a press release. How have we reverted back to the days of no oversight, no safeguards, no screening, and no due diligence? I'm troubled by the fact that members of the legislature are promoting the return to unsafe, unsanitary back alley procedures that advocates have fought so passionately against for decades. The bill might not make it through the House, where it would need the vote of every Democrat, and at least one Democrat has said she opposes repealing the state's 24-hour waiting period, which is another provision of the bill. Senator Thomas Albert said the bill advances a, quote, anti-life agenda that gets more radical and extreme by the day. Also in Michigan, a bill in the Senate aimed at making it legal for women to pump breast milk in public removes the words woman and she from a 2014 law on breastfeeding in public. The bill also replaces references to females with the words individuals. Maine has joined states like New York, California, and Vermont in eliminating gestational limits on abortion. On Wednesday, it became legal to kill a baby beyond 24 weeks if a physician determines it is medically necessary. Another new law, taking effect in January, requires private insurers to pay for a woman's abortion and not apply the cost to her plan's deductible. Under threat of a congressional subpoena, the Department of Veterans Affairs has disclosed that it provided 88 abortions through the end of fiscal year 2023, which concluded September 30th. 64 were done because of threats to the mother's health, 15 were for pregnancies resulting from rape, and 9 were for threats to the mom's life. Republican lawmakers who oppose the VA policy said it violates a section of the Veterans Health Care Act of 1992, which spells out that abortion and abortion counseling are prohibited at VA facilities. Abortion advocates like to say that if you have no uterus, you should not have an opinion on abortion. But second gentleman Doug Emhoff, the husband of Vice President Kamala Harris, was in Miami today to urge men to support abortion. According to the Miami Herald, leaders from Men for Choice and Planned Parenthood were among those in attendance to hear Emhoff promote, quote, the importance of male allyship in the fight for reproductive freedom. So if you don't have a uterus, but you think abortion is a wonderful thing, you are entitled to an opinion after all. And finally, an 11-year-old girl in Great Britain who became pregnant after being raped by two 14-year-olds she met online, this week was ordered to have an abortion against her will. The girl said she was happy to be pregnant, but a judge decided it was in the child's best interest to subject her to a violent and invasive abortion procedure. The girl is more than 15 weeks pregnant. And that's Abortion in the News.
At the top of political news this week, Republicans unanimously elected pro-life Congressman Mike Johnson as House Speaker on Wednesday, eagerly elevating a deeply conservative but lesser-known leader to the major seat of U.S. power and ending weeks of political chaos. Johnson, 51 of Louisiana, swept through on the first ballot with support from all Republicans, anxious to put the past weeks of tumult behind them and get on with the business of governing. He was quickly sworn into office, second in line to the presidency. The People's House is back in business, Johnson declared after taking the gavel. A lower-ranked member of the House GOP leadership team, Johnson emerged as the fourth Republican nominee in what had become an almost absurd cycle of political infighting since Kevin McCarthy's ouster as GOP fractions jockeyed for power. While not the party's top choice for the gavel, the deeply religious and even-keeled Johnson has few foes and an important GOP backer, Donald Trump. I think he's going to be a fantastic speaker, Trump said Wednesday at the New York courthouse, where the former president, who is now the Republican frontrunner for president in 2024, is on trial over a lawsuit alleging business fraud. Johnson immediately won the support of pro-life organizations, including Priests for Life, Students for Life, and Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life America. Priests for Life National Director Frank Pavone released the following statement following the election of Mike Johnson. Great news in the election of Representative Mike Johnson as our new Speaker of the House. It is great news for America and great news for the pro-life movement. He has been a great friend of Priests for Life and of the unborn for many years, and we look forward to his leadership. Arkansas Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders banned a number of gender-neutral pregnancy terms, like pregnant people and birthing person, from state documents, calling the phrases woke nonsense. Here's what she had to say.
Today, we're taking a stand against woke nonsense. What frankly started as a fad among a few grad students has seeped down into corporations, the healthcare industry, and increasingly state government. It's demeaning to women, and it needs to stop. In a moment, I'll sign an executive order banning a number of all sorts of ridiculous words from state government documents. Those include words like pregnant people, laboring person, birth giver, and several other nonsense terms that have cropped up in recent years. Some on the left will accuse us of being nitpicky, that Arkansas should just lay down and accept the cultural revolution without complaint. I say it's the exact opposite. It's the left that decided that woman is a dirty word. It's the left that decided we needed to toss out basic biology and basic grammar along with it.
Incumbent Andy Beshear, Democrat, and Daniel Cameron, Republican, are running in the November 7, 2023 Kentucky gubernatorial election. According to CNN's Eric Bradner, the race will test whether a Democrat incumbent can survive in a deep red state where his party's voter registration advantage has been erased in recent years, and the political environment is increasingly dominated by national themes. Abortion has been a central issue in the race. At an October 16th debate, Beshear said Cameron's position gives a rapist more rights than their victim. It is wrong. We need to change the law. We need to make sure that those individuals have that option. At the same debate, Cameron said, I'm the pro-life candidate, and I've said that Andy Beshear is the abortion candidate. I've also said that if the legislature were to give me a bill with exceptions in it, I would certainly sign it. But Andy Beshear wants no limits on abortion. Biden's re-election campaign said on Tuesday that President Joe Biden won't file to have his name appear on the 2024 New Hampshire Democratic primary ballot. Biden has been struggling with the state for nearly a year over its historical early primary date and will not make the trip to Concord to file this week. In a break with centuries-old tradition, the incumbent president will not appear on the state's Democratic primary ballot at all, with the National Party pledging to discipline candidates who compete in unsanctioned primaries like the one New Hampshire plans to hold. Biden's re-election campaign notified New Hampshire's Democratic Party chair, Ray Buckley, of the president's decision on Tuesday evening, citing guidance from the National Party that urged campaigns not to place their candidates' names on the ballot. A letter obtained by USA Today stated, Biden for president will refrain from submitting a declaration of candidacy for the primary ahead of Friday's candidate filing deadline for the primary. The president looks forward to having his name on New Hampshire's general election ballot as the nominee of the Democratic Party after officially securing the nomination at the 2024 Democratic National Convention, where he will tirelessly campaign to earn every single vote in the Granite State next November. Other presidential candidates have been making the trip to New Hampshire State House for the last 2 weeks to file their paperwork to compete in the 2024 primaries. And that's political news in a nutshell.
The owner of Copper Blue Restaurant in Milford, Ohio, is a dedicated pro-lifer who put a sign outside his business urging people to vote against a proposed ballot amendment that would invent a right to abortion in the state constitution. Some of his staffers were so angry about the sign that they walked off the job, forcing owner Brian Arlinghouse to close the restaurant.
But the good news is he has reopened. I told the staff that I didn't fault them for taking a stance, Arlinghouse told Catholic Vote. That's their prerogative. But I let them know that I think it's a battle between good and evil. Arlinghouse cited his faith and the profound negative effects abortion has on women in his decision to take a stand. I don't think it's good for women, he said, As a Catholic, there are sins that cry out to heaven for vengeance, and one of them is the oppression of women and children.
Ohio voters will go to the polls to vote on Issue 1 on November 7th. If the yes side of the ballot initiative gains a simple majority of the vote, a so-called right to abortion will be added to the Ohio state constitution. Ohio Republican Governor Mike DeWine believes the proposed amendment, which would negate every pro-life law in the state, goes way, way too far. I just don't think it fits Ohio, DeWine said. It's not who we are. It's not where we are. Tonight, we ask you to remember the victims of the mass shooting in Maine and the people of Israel and Gaza in your prayers. And be sure to join us next week for a special election edition of Pro-Life Primetime News. You won't want to miss the insights from our political experts. And thank you so much for joining us tonight on Pro-Life Primetime News, produced at Priests for Life headquarters in Titusville, Florida.
If you like our show, please support us by making a donation to prolifegift.org. These donations help fund all of our work here at Priests for Life, which enables us to continue educating, equipping, and activating God's people to end abortion. For all your pro-life news updates during the week, please follow us on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Pro-Life News Show. I'm Teresa Watson, Executive Manager.
I'm Leslie Palma, Communications Director. Remember, life is the only choice.